We're good.
We
Your
good?
mom's okay?
Yes, thank you. She had
Lisa.
another seizure stroke while I was gone, but my sister was with her, and
Yeah.
it's just taken her a little longer to recover.
Yeah. Well, Lisa's mother fell yesterday, broke her hip,
Oh, no.
had surgery this morning, and it's just not good because her dementia's getting worse.
Oh,
She has a pacemaker. Oh yeah, she has a pacemaker. She made it through the surgery, but the rehab's going to be so long and difficult because it's not registering either.
Right. She didn't know where she is.
Nope. So,
And you
but
can't go visit.
nope. We saw it coming, though. You could see it coming.
Stephen, that's terrible.
Yep.
Let me see. I got a little issue here.
Hello, sir. How are you? I lost one. Pat's got.
You did say he's not coming, correct?
Yeah, I don't think.
Keep the city. Yeah. 150 miles.
You don't have to ask. I mean, that's possible.
Water got me. I keep saying, but now, well, it's my roof. My ceiling's good. It's not as bad. But, yeah, it's a good thing it didn't stall. 16 miles an hour.
I need to check what it was. So he's on the way down, but it's still high, he's still pushing up.
Did you know what you did? It liked you, not me. See this? Look, it's red again.
You can see
But it
her.
goes back and forth. You think it's the Wi-Fi?
Yeah, well, it depends on. Let me see.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Well, I see one counter.
As soon as you get that Wi-Fi,
I am blasting the person that called me a dog. Vernon, in an open meeting. No, excuse me, not in an open meeting. As he was leaving, he told Julie that the city hall's not a dog count because when I was at the city hall for the hurricane, from the beginning to the end, I'm also the person behind getting this place cleaned up. That's why he's getting what I said. And he told Julie that Sarah's not a dog count. No, two people. Did Jimmy Bruce off? Call me a dog. Call me a dog. Well, you better not talk about the truth. I am. It's on. It's on.
Mr. Crater, Public Works.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Before I open Public Works, I'd like everybody to keep Byron and the mayor in your prayers, please, because I understand that Byron had to go to the hospital this afternoon for some issues, and the mayor had something done yesterday, so please keep them in your prayers. And also, I'd like to thank Desi and Steph for possibly helping us not avoid maybe an open meetings violation the other night, so thanks much for that, I appreciate that. And now I'd like to open up the Public Works Committee. We do have a quorum. Byron and Steph are not here. First off, I'd like to hear the report from the Public Works Director, Mr. Albert Jock.
Good afternoon. I guess we'll get to mosquito discussion first thing, get it out of the way. We started spraying Friday night. After the wind laid down, we were able to start. We sprayed every night since. Monday, I increased the rate of chemical that we were putting out. So, last night, I had him spray the whole city. He was spraying up to Northern Avenue, then the next night, he was going all the way to the city line, then start back on in and doing what he could. So anyway, as of last night, we started spraying every night. Today, I increased the rate again on the chemical. We will be spraying the whole city every night until things get better. I will be rotating chemicals, which means I have one truck that has permethrin in it, and I have another truck that has Delta-Guard. We will rotate those every other day. Permethrin will be sprayed. I ordered chemical today. When I was asked Monday how much I had enough for 5 or 6 weeks normal. If we got into what's normal for this time of the year, which was 4 nights a week spraying the city twice. Well, when I figured this morning with what we did last night and what's occurred during the day, I had enough for about 15 days. So anyway, I had to order some more chemical today. So that's where it stands with mosquitoes. Yes, sir.
I might put this out there. It's not enough, I know that, because they were terrible, but I sprayed my yard this morning with malathion, and let me tell you, it made a world of difference. So if you're having bad mosquito problems and you want to get rid of them, that stuff works pretty good.
As far as adult siding right now, I was telling, I think I told Jeff earlier, we could have 6 trucks. We could knock them down tonight, they're going to be back tomorrow. Till the city is cleaned up and we get some help on the outside perimeter of the city, it's going to be like this. It always has been. This isn't the first time I've gone through this. I've been doing this for 17 years. I've been through some hurricanes. I'm hoping that we do get some relief from FEMA. I don't know that. I think, who knows? You know, we were very, very fortunate. Because had that storm, just think about it, 20 miles this way. I drove to Lake Arthur Friday afternoon after I got off work. Well, they've got some damage there, and that's not far. Yeah, Jennings. I was talking to people in a gas station here in town Saturday. Telling me nothing's open in Jennings. Everything's shut down. I understand they had one gas station, and then they ran out of gas. I mean, it could have been a lot worse. A lot worse. Any other questions as far as the students? I'll go over a couple of other things with you. We had 2 pieces of equipment go out for service last month. The sweeper is down. It went down Monday with one of the side brooms, one of the gutter brooms. I expect the repair to be done tomorrow. The part has been ordered. I had them ship it overnight. The mechanic from Scott Equipment will be coming to do the repair. Other thing is the generator at City Hall went down on Thursday morning or probably Wednesday night. Parts are ordered. That takes care of that. Damage. I lost a roll-up door at the barn. Thankfully, I called Ed Habits. He came over that afternoon after lunch. He closed it in for me. Secured the building. So I thank him for that. I issued 5,000 bags to the street department for sandbags. And I ordered 5 loads of sand, which was 66 yards. We had about 3 loads on the ground already, besides these 5. I looked at it this morning, because I went and looked at the incinerator building, because there's some damage on the door, on a roll-up door there. And there's not 3 loads on the ground now, so they went through some bags. They had, Gilbert's probably gonna tell you some numbers, but they did have some on the floor. And another thank you I wanna give to is the fire department for last Sunday. They helped tremendously. The guys we had there, and the 3 or 4 guys that came from the fire department, they were filling bags all Sunday afternoon. I mean, it was really a great help. And that's all I have for you, unless you guys have any other questions.
Anybody have anything? Thank you, Mr. Allen.
You're welcome. Thank you. Do I first turn this off?
No, you can leave it on, that's fine. Next up, Street Commissioner, Mr. Gilbert Olsen.
I got the mayor, doctor, my glass is foggy. First of all, the mayor and I would like to thank the Crowley Police Department for helping out do the law with stop sign and putting out barricades. Second, the fire department for helping us cutting up trees, clearing up limbs from homes in the street. It's holding up the streets and the driveways for the home. I want to thank the recreation department for sending 2 guys that help us to the sandbags. So, thanks all the street department workers for filling and handing out over 4,500 sandbags in 4 days. And it could have been a little more, because some people were still in their own. Also, a big thanks to our street department worker, Rick, Robert, James Gott, Matthew Dupree, Rick Alamo, Leroy Dupree. These guys were put on 24-hour call to assist in cutting over 50 trees and hundreds of limbs to clear our streets and yard, all to clear our limbs. They were on power lines. They also put out stop signs and barricades. We are still cutting more trees and limbs all over. Excuse my glass thing getting funny. Still cutting trees and limbs all over the city from Florida. Also cleaning gutters and our streets and parks. Our guys did a great job in this type of winter, and just wanted to thank them for going out day and night doing Florida and making sure Crowley was kept safe. For the month of August, we also completed the cemetery for the open graves, thanks to Robin and Leroy. All the graves that you all know about, over 20 of them, we repaired and put tops over there and cemented. We have been keeping up with the grass. We rebuilt 5 cat basin, and we also cut 10 trees that was dead or diseased. And basically we fit potholes and put limestone roads in. Any questions?
I think the entire council would like to thank all the city workers, not just street department, but everybody that really put out and did a good job during all this stuff. I know it was taxing on y'all. Thank y'all very much.
You're welcome.
Unrelated to this, I had someone come in for lunch today, and they were asking about 60th Street between C and D, or D and E maybe. He said they had some barricades still up. Is that you guys that's working on that? Or?
That's that project for the drainage department.
It's a drainage project?
Right.
Okay.
But those are our barricades, the drums and the iron barricades, those are for the city.
Anybody else got anything from Mr. Cooper? Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper. Next, we'll hear from City Engineer, Mr. Tim Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have several items that are going to be action items for council this evening and next Wednesday. If you will look at my report and go to page 2, First item is the street improvements, drainage and street improvements projects, and the updates and requests for council action begin on page 3. If you're at page 3 of my report, you'll see in the left margin, I have these big letters to try to get everybody to focus on those items as I bring them up. Where you see the bold A in the left margin, citywide drainage improvements project. You can see that in red and yellow highlight, I have that construction on Hockaday is expected to be completed during the month of September. The construction in the immediate area of Notre Dame High School was finished in August, which is what we hope for, to get that out of the way when school began. In September, we'll also possibly begin construction of the drainage improvements in East Park subdivision. And at this time, we still believe that we're on course to complete the project in the May, June timeframe of next year. I can go to item B on that page, partial payment estimate number 3. Because the last day of the cutoff was Monday, August 31st, we don't have the number for you tonight, but I can tell you it's on par with the partial payment estimates number 1, 2, and 3, which were around the $200,000 mark. I would expect to be reporting next week in excess of about $250,000 on that partial payment estimate after retainage. So I'd like council action to approve partial payment estimate number 3 as I will report to you at the meeting next Wednesday.
I'll make that motion to move it to the full council.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, we can look at item C on that same page. This is a change order that council looked at last month. And what you did last month was you authorized us to prepare the change order. This has to do with adding some improvements to the drainage contract on First Street between Avenue N and the Acadia Council on Aging office. We estimated at that time, last month, that the cost for the change order would be in the neighborhood of between $40,000 and $50,000. This change order has given you the final number that we would like you to consider, which is $42,504.60. I have the plan, if anybody wants to look at it now or any time, and I'll just hold it up. Basically what we're doing, these two plan sheets show that we're going to be removing and replacing driveway culverts so we can get the drainage system on the south side of First Street on a uniform grade to the outfall. The Riceland Drive outfall is off of First Street, between First Street and the BNSF ditch on the north side of the tracks. And so we're going to be able to improve a pretty bad situation on the west side of our outfall. And these are the plans. I'll put them here in case after the meeting or anytime you want to take a closer look at it. But when you approve this change order, you'll be approving that plan and that change order document in that amount.
I would so move.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, next item is at D, change order number 3. And I'm going to give out some reference material on this. We'll go over this. Is in relation to the intersection of Avenue G and First Street. I think you're all aware that the washout developed there underneath the pavement. And we did some exploratory to see exactly what was causing it. We have determined what was causing it, and we have a recommendation for how to go about fixing it and restoring that intersection. Not current Crowley's fault. The chairman asked, is it Crowley's fault? let me get into it. It's interesting. I'm at item D, and what I've done there is made reference to this isometric drawing, basically fancy word for three-space sketch on a two-space piece of paper that we did. And if you look at that, I put numbers on that page, 1 through 14, next to some notes on that page. And if you can focus on where you see the number 1, that's where the washout is. And you see there in pink, I show you where Avenue G crosses East First Street. And Avenue G would be north-south on this diagram, left to right. And First Street would be west to east from the bottom of the page going toward the top of the page. So that orients you to the intersection. What I showed at number 1 there is where the washout developed. What's important to know about that is that it developed next to a drainage manhole, which you can see there. I have it labeled at item 2, old drain manhole. What you need to know, I guess, first off, is this intersection is has been attacked over the years by utilities, etc. There are some 12 different utility lines that crisscross the intersection. All that could make it very interesting and difficult to actually explore and then fix. But I think we have a good solution. What I'm explaining, and you'll have time between now and next Wednesday to go through my explanation that I prepared at the bottom of page 3 and the top of page 4. I tried to give you a good picture of what's there, but basically what happened, Crowley owned its water system years ago, around the Mayor Gielan era. Crowley sold the water system to Clico. Eventually, Clico sold it to Water. What we suspect from what we see there is that the water line existed before the drainage and the streets were improved at this intersection. And if you look at that manhole where I have item 2 there, you see some odd things going on at the bottom of that manhole. What apparently was done was the manhole was constructed. Again, the water line was there, and you can see the water line, by the way, is indicated by a number 9 and a number 8. There's a crisscross of water lines, and the water lines intersect right next to the manhole, probably the southwest part of the manhole. Apparently what was decided at that time was that instead of relocating the water line, which would have cost the city, and it was the drainage project and the street project was a city project, instead of relocating that water line, we're just going to put that manhole in place, and we're going to build out what I would call a conflict chamber so that drainage can cross the water line. The water line is in that chamber. We do conflict boxes all the time. This is a little bit odd because it was built of brick. Over time, the brick deteriorated, and with every storm and rise and fall of water, the soil was eaten out from the bottom, and eventually, over the course of half a century, it emerged at the surface. So when you look at where I have the washout, you can see that washout is right above the conflict chamber. And you'll see where I have item number 3, storm drain. You can see that storm drain is colored aqua, and the other storm drains are colored gray. The reason I've colored it different is that storm drain needs to be replaced. The other storm drains don't need to be replaced. All we want to do is remove and replace that manhole, build it of reinforced concrete precast, and get it to connect back into the lines that are needing to go into it. We need to replace that storm drain at 3 because it actually has a pronounced dip in it between the manhole and the southeast corner of the intersection where there's an inlet. So we need to replace that inlet. We need a conflict box where your sewer line, you can see it's 7. It's a green line, I say sanitary sewer. That's a grade line. We can't offset it. It can't be offset above or below because it has to have a slope to it. So we're gonna have to build a conflict box where the sanitary sewer crosses that storm drain. And we're gonna replace that storm drain from the southeast corner at the catch basin to the new manhole. I went to the trouble to do this isometric because I just don't think I could have explained it without it. If you turn the page, is the drawing that's going to be a part of the change order that I'm asking you to consider. When this came up, we have a contract, and we still have a contract now with E.L. Habits for labor and equipment. And we engaged them to go out and excavate, remove the street, and explore and come up with this information I'm giving you today. Now that we know what to do, what needs to happen to improve it was not the kind of work that was contemplated with that labor and equipment contract. At the same time, we have unit prices in the Southern Constructors contract for everything we need to do here. So you have competitive bid prices that we can apply under the Southern Constructors project to get it done. And I believe that you're going to get it done for a lot less money than if we use the labor and equipment contract. For one thing, I don't think that the labor and equipment contract has the size equipment that's needed for this. The labor and equipment contract has a specific amount of manpower and a specific type of equipment to do relatively small things instead of your street department or sewer department doing it. This kind of work to be able to lift the precast members of that manhole and set them at the bottom and everything is going to take extra equipment. That's not in the contract for labor and equipment. It wasn't ever intended to be so. It's my judgment, my opinion, that it's far less risky cost-wise to do this under the Southern Constructors contract. And that amount is on the last page. You see on the change order, the last page, we've used existing pay items, and we're looking at to finish the project there, manhole, conflict, box, street inlet, pipe, backfill, compact, restore the street with limestone. We don't yet think we're going to get into the asphalt in the contract for now, especially with the approaching street improvements project. Maybe we can just maintain the limestone. We'll see how that works over time. We could temporarily patch it with cold mix if we had to. Change order amount right at this time we're estimating to be $24,083. If you looked at it in terms of the material and paying labor and equipment under the Habits contract at $2,200 a day, I think you would eat at $24,000. So my suggestion, my recommendation and request to you is to approve change order number 3 as presented.
I'd like to make a motion to approve change order number 3 as presented.
Second.
Brad.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. And so we go on to item E on page 4, the citywide street improvements project bond issue. And this afternoon we have with us your bond counsel, Jay Delafield, and our financial consultants, Whitney Laird and Sean Toots. They're going to come up now and give you an update on the bond market and where we stand on the ability to proceed with the bond issues. I'll shoot the bond issues so that we can go forward with the street improvements project. So I call upon Jay and Whitney and Sean at this time.
Good afternoon, folks.
Press your mic, please.
How about that?
Little button,
Any better?
little red light should come on.
Sorry,
There you go.
I can't, I'm colorblind. The last time I appeared in front of you folks with both Whitney Laird and Sean Toots, we told you we would come back to you before we actually went out to issue bonds. We're here today to keep that promise. On March 11, we appeared in front of you. We had no idea that the COVID world would collapse on us shortly after that. And we've all endured the impacts of COVID. And now I've had to endure the impacts of Hurricane Laura as well. Lake Charles, it appears as though an atomic bomb went off in Lake Charles. And my office is right on Ryan Street in Lake Charles. And everything around us is essentially devastated, except the Whitney Bank building, which is built like a blockhouse. But having said that much, there's no utilities, I've got no phone service, I've got no internet, I've got no fax, anything. So I'm here to explain to you what we did back in March so you can understand, but I can only address the legal issues for you. So let's talk about that. In March, we suggested to you that we could issue up to $20 million in revenue bonds secured by your lawfully available funds. That is only available through the Louisiana Community Development Authority. So you guys approved us to go forward with this transaction. We went to the Louisiana Community Development Authority. They approved your transaction. We also went to the Louisiana State Bond Commission, which is the acid test in our world. They approved your transaction. We went back to the Louisiana Community Development Authority, and they gave final approval to your transaction. So here we are. Now, having said that, after you guys approved not to exceed $20 million, your financing team, along with the mayor and the staff of the city, got together and we decided the best methodology was to issue 2 series of bonds. And I'll have both Whitney and Sean explain the reason for that. But what we were suggesting to you is the first series of bonds would be not to exceed $14 million at an interest rate not to exceed 7%. Now, we don't expect 7% bonds out there. We're going to be closer to the 3% area or the 4% area. But having said that much, what I can tell you is all the legal requirements, save except for the last resolution that you guys would adopt on September 9th, which is a confirming resolution that we are confirming that we came back to you as we promised in March to get your approval to issue the first series of bonds. Now that first series of bonds would be not to exceed $14 million. And what would it do? It would do drainage, it would do street work, and some improvements for the purposes of supporting the transaction that we just completed for the turfing of the ball fields. So having said all that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to both Sean and Whitney and let them explain to you where the bond market is right now and what the financial options are to you with respect to some premium bonds.
Good evening. It is good to be back with you. I would have never envisioned last time I was before you in March that we'd be back here. I wouldn't be back here until now. But, thankfully, we're all back. As Jay indicated, when we came in March, we talked about issuing $20 million in bonds, which combined with funds in the capital project fund would have funded various projects, 2 street projects, 2 phases of the street projects, and the drainage projects, among some other minor things. With the changes, so getting to the bond market, I guess the bond market hasn't changed a whole lot in terms of interest rates. Still very favorable market for issuing bonds, rates are still low. What has changed is investors and particularly the rating agencies are taking a much more critical. What I mean by that is when COVID first hit, immediately everybody thought, oh no, revenues are going to drop to zero, we're not going to have any money to operate businesses or governments. What are we going to do? Now we've got a little bit of history behind us and we've learned that, okay, while revenues have certainly leveled out, we haven't seen the huge decreases that we feared we might see. However, the rating agencies don't know yet, and we're seeing in some of our clients that they are running their projections on as much as a 50% revenue decline. We contend and we argue with them on a regular basis that's ridiculous. We've got enough history now to show you that that's not the case. But with that said, what that led us to the recommendation of is let's not issue $20 million, which although we based it on pretty conservative revenue projections for the city, it doesn't, in their stress test, it puts a bigger strain on the revenues than issuing a smaller amount. So let's do the first series in somewhere less than that, whether it's 10 million or 14 million, somewhere that covers certainly the first phase of the streets, potentially reimburses you for some of the drainage projects, and then if there's some other things that need to be funded, you can certainly include that. What that does is it gives the rating agencies and the investors in general a little more comfort that there's some cushion there. Then we would come back later, once we've got a little more history. Worst case scenario, we're in the same position we are now, so we're no worse off than we are now. Best case scenario, we've now got some history of revenues. They're taking a little bit easier stance, so we get a little bit better view from a rating perspective, which improves your ability to issue bonds. Best case scenario is revenues come back, we see an increase in revenues, and maybe you don't even have to issue as much bonds to fund all these projects. So that's kind of, so we didn't want to go forward with the $20 million authorization issued previously without coming back to you and saying, look, our recommendation today is let's do that in 2 tranches instead of 1 tranche. Let's issue the first series of somewhere between 10 and 14, no more than 14. I think that's probably a safe number. And then we'll come back to you again at some point down the road when we're ready to bid the next phase of the streets and issue the rest of the bonds or as much as is needed to fund that project. It'll also give you a better idea of what the costs are looking like on those projects, because obviously revenues are not the only thing that have changed with COVID. You know, obviously the economics have changed, so hopefully that is to the city's benefit, but we'll find out if we'll get projects. So that's kind of where we are today. Again, that's what we're proposing to you, and we're recommending to you. I don't know, Whitney, if you have anything to add in regards to the bond market. Again, it's still a favorable market, that's the good thing. I'm not in the business of predicting interest rates, so I would be sitting on a beach somewhere with a little umbrella drink if I could predict interest rates. But obviously there's people that make a lot more money than me that do it, and the good news is they don't expect rates to really increase anytime soon. So I think for the long term we're in good shape there. But I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has them. Yeah, today's rates were in the 3 to 350 range. Just so you know.
When this was presented to us before, we have, when this was presented to us before, we have, I think right now, maybe $10 million in our infrastructure fund. And it was presented to us as to, with what we have in there, with what we're gonna make below, when it was $5 million, I think, something like that. And, but we would never deplete that fund, I think, something like that. And, but we would never deplete that fund, and it would actually pay for these bonds, the bond market. Is that just?
And the main reason for that is when we ran those numbers, the assumptions we made in terms of sales tax collections, we actually used not this year's, we used past years, which this year's, we used past years, which I think we're still on pace to actually exceed that number. So even given what's happened, again, it's not but we're exception that it is reality. The reality is your sales tax are still coming in at decent numbers. Maybe not as high as your sales tax are still coming in at decent numbers. Maybe not as high as they were pre-COVID, but still better than they were historically. But the more is it really that level? We're going to see that decrease again. So they're, for lack of a better term, beating you up a little bit on that. So we kind of want to minimize that impact by decreasing, because then you've got a lot of cushion. Then when we're ready to go back for the second tranche again, hopefully by that time, you know, we've got some real history to show them, hey, look, you can't argue that it's going to be a 50% decrease anymore because we're still exceeding the historical levels.
Yeah, and I agree with that, because I think we were all in that kind of frame of mind, but our sales tax actually increased because people weren't going out and shopping. And if you pass by the service stations and the grocery stores here after Laura, all of these people from Lake Charles are coming to Crowley now, so I would anticipate that our sales tax is going to be increased even more, because there's a lot of activity in Crowley right now due to this disaster over in Lake Charles. So it's kind of a good thing for us in that respect. Okay, well, thank you very much. Anybody else got any questions?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Just to add to what you just said, I came on Sunday to wash my clothes here. So I'm spending money in your town.
I've seen it.
Jay's coming back to you though.
Can we get to the resolution itself? Yeah. Yes, sir. I prepared a confirming resolution for you guys to consider at your council meeting on September 9th. And what I'll do is I'll leave it for you along with the certificates that have to be signed in connection with the actual transaction. But the resolution caption says, a resolution confirming and reauthorizing the March 11, 2020 resolution of the City of Crowley, Louisiana, to incur debt and to borrow from the Louisiana Local Governmental Environmental Facilities and Community Development Authority an amount not to exceed $20 million for the purpose of financing costs of engineering, construction, additions, acquisitions, repairs, and expansions needed for the citywide street improvements, including drainage, and providing for other matters in connection with the foregoing. The resolution goes forward to say that the first transaction would be not to exceed $14 million. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to address them, but we have fulfilled our promise that we made to you back in March to come back to you. I'm just sorry that we had to come back after Hurricane Laura and COVID-19. So I'll be happy to address any questions that you might have. And I will leave this for you guys and for Aaron. And I'm sorry. I'll give this to you guys right now.
Thank you.
Any questions for me? Thank you very much.
I'd like to make a motion that we forward this resolution for consideration to the full council next week.
Second?
Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, Mr.
Continue,
Chairman.
Mr. Mayor.
Again, on page 5, you look at item F, the F in the left margin there. The subject here is going to be city-owned parking lots for the citywide street improvements project. I'll recall for you that when we presented the streets project over a year ago, and then we presented it again in the March timeframe when you adopted the first resolution for funding, improvement of existing parking lots was in the project. We're going to improve any parking lot that was in existence and being used at the time. It includes, for instance, Martin Luther King Center. But most of the parking lots are at the rec center. We estimated that there are some 300, maybe a little more than 300 parking places available today. And that's variable because the biggest parking lot in Hinskins is limestone. So the efficiency of the use of the parking lot is very low because you don't have stalls that manage how people come in and out. So we're roughly estimating you have 300. When we did the streets estimate, we estimated the parking lot improvements would be on the order of about $660,000. So we had $660,000 in the $18 million street improvements project. That was before the turf project. With the turf project in mind, we've worked with Peter and done some estimates, and we think it's fairly safe to say we need to double that parking lot, parking space available in parking lots at the rec center. When you enlarge the parking lots that are there, you have to actually enlarge them over natural ground that hasn't had a base formed. So when we double the parking lot, parking space availability, we do more than double the cost, because now we're building base and surface. We estimate today that in order to get the 600 to 650 parking spaces that we need to be able to accommodate the traffic of 50 and 60 teams, that's going to probably increase that cost from $660,000 probably to between 1.6 and 1.7 billion. We're basically adding $1 billion to the project. That's a huge increase. We do have contingencies that were in the $20 million estimate on which the bond issue is based. And I'll let either Jay or Sean or Whitney explain, but we believe that the additional cost, now that we have a new purpose for the parking lot, is something that's readily covered through contingencies and through bond premium. And I'll let one of the financial consultants explain it, but what I'm asking you to do tonight is to authorize a separate project for the parking lot so that we can get that bid out and under construction and completed in the January, February timeframe. We wouldn't be able to do it while waiting on the bond issue in the beginning of the streets phase A that we're talking about. We want to focus on just those parking lots and get that in place so that we're ready for the hopefully the many large tournaments that are going to come to Crowley. And keep in mind that the business plan called for, it was based on possibly as many as 40 tournaments. And Peter's going to come up here, I think in a moment, and tell you a little bit about the numbers of tournaments. He's also going to tell you what he's finding about the size of the tournaments. The business plan also was based on tournaments of between 30 and 40 teams. What we see, and the reason why the parking space is critical, is that we're seeing the interest in Crowley is for much larger tournaments, so much more traffic in and out, and more reason to accommodate that traffic with parking spaces. I have children, grandchildren. We've gone to tournaments in places east and west and north, and the thing that probably aggravates a tournament goer more than anything is having to park off in a field somewhere, literally city blocks away from the field, being late to see the game and having to trudge back and forth. You come away from that experience saying, well, I don't know that we want to go back there again. So I think we want to avoid that here. The 650 spaces, more or less, that we're going to create isn't the last word on how many use of on-street parallel parking, and we possibly look at other areas to expand if we need to. But if 650 spaces is expected to be insufficient for a particular tournament, let's say we have a 70 or 80 team tournament and we want to be sure that people have a good experience, we can set up temporary parking along existing paved roads and not spend any money on that and see how that works. Tournaments, in a year's time, very many tournaments that are going to exceed the 650 spaces that we want to provide now. So at this time, unless you want to question anything I've brought up to now, I'd like the financial consultants to give you a little bit of information about the premium bond aspect.
Well, I have to make one comment. I wish you'd have gave that argument when I was arguing about selling the parking lot that we had next to Miller Stadium, but I guess it's too late for that now.
Well,
and also, was it considered that I think Mr. Bobby Hanks has offered parking spaces at his rice mill once that's complete, and has that been taken into account when you're talking about all of these spaces that we need?
That has been considered, and Mr. Hanks' offer was also that it was during non-working hours. So if they're in the middle of a harvest season or something, like if we do have some tournaments that they're requesting a Wednesday, Thursday, or like a Wednesday through Sunday time slot, you know, we can't park on his property while he's trying to operate his business. So that would kind of handcuff us a little bit too. But he was very generous in offering some of his property when he could.
Yeah, fair. Thank you.
Question. How many parking spaces were in the initial business plan anticipated for what you had prepared?
In the initial business plan, we did not address existing parking spaces. Parking, we attacked the business aspect of the tournament industry. And what we've learned since even we presented the business plan was that we projected 40 tournaments or 40 weekends with a 20-team average. What we have seen, or what I have seen in the last 10 months, is those averages are now at 50, 60 teams, and some are exceeding 90 teams. I do have for a weekend date where we would co-host a World Series event of over 110 teams between us and Broussard. The other aspect of that is with the teams going up, we also have to look at what happened last week with Laurel. Now you have McMurray Park, Frash Park, the Power Center, artificial surfaces in the Lake Charles area that are offline, and I don't project that they're going to be back online before the spring hits. So with that being said, our facility will be the westernmost artificial complex in the state of Louisiana along the I-10 corridor. So 60, 70, 80 teams are not outside of that window. We did have some of the additional parking that is coming into play that Mr. Mayor's talking about, especially in the Instance parking lot. We have one field where the fences are being moved in. So that gave us some more parking on that end. But we're also incorporating new parking on existing property that we have. That was kind of phase 2, phase 3 thinking down the road after we got in our feet wet with the tournament system. But at that time, we were still expecting 20, 30, maybe 40 team tournaments. But that's not what we're seeing now in the industry, I guess would be the correct terminology.
Will the revenue from the tournaments be required to facilitate this additional parking expense, or will that come from another revenue source?
I think when Mr. Mayor is talking about the revenue source would come from the bonding issuance, and I'll let the financial professionals handle that. But as far as the business plan that we presented, we did not incorporate parking or adding on parking, because I think the overlay project and the existing parking had already been considered with the overlay project. And like I said, it's been recent history that shows that the tournament, the number of participants in the tournament has doubled and tripled in most cases. And now that's going to be the new norm, I feel, looking to what happened to our neighbors to the west. I feel for those guys, but by default, they got to go somewhere. They're still going to play ball. COVID-19 showed that. Even when the pandemic hit and everybody was, how do you want to view it, locked down or quarantined, I mean, these parks that were used to hosting 30, 40 team tournaments were 80, 90, they were turning down requests after they got to 90 teams. Speaking to other directors in Youngsville and Broussard, they loved the idea of having 90 teams, but it pushed them to the limits. Their scenes were busting because of parking and things of that nature. And then he said that we love having the people in town, we love having the people in the park, but it's really tight, is the word that he used. So he said, get ready. Yes, sir.
So in your initial budget plan, you were looking at,
Yes,
so
sir.
now, you're increasing that by twofold. That's a good problem to have, right?
Yes, sir. Very good.
If I could get Whitney or Sean to talk about the premium bond that will help provide the funds to be able to spend an extra $1 million for doubling the parking spaces.
Sure, I'll address it real quick. I guess the question that Tim raised when we got here was that if we needed another $1 million for the new parking, is there room, would there be money available? Could we do it within the confines of this? And the quick answer is yes, and I guess the longer answer is there's, I guess, a couple of different places. One, we did have some contingency built into the project, so to the extent you don't need that contingency, there's certainly probably more than $1 million there. Hopefully the projects will come in below where we estimated. But ultimately, we also, when we ran the numbers, we assumed that, again, up to $20 million in bonds. Because of where the market is now, because rates are so low, what's happening is investors are paying premiums for bonds, because if the market is saying your interest rate on bonds is 2.8%, an investor's not going to take a bond with a 2.8% interest rate because they just can't trade those. So typically the bonds will have 4% interest rates on them. So what they'll do is they'll buy a 4% bond, but they'll pay you a premium for it. So just by example, the numbers we ran when we did the initial analysis, which again were pretty conservative numbers based on revenue, we ran a $20 million issue. It actually raised about $21.5 million seeds to use for projects. So there was additional money there. If the project, the whole $20 million, we would downsize that and just raise $20 million. You'd only pay back less than $20 million. But so that was kind of a long answer to yes. If you really needed $21 million, you still could issue $20 billion in bonds, get $21 billion. You only pay back $20 million because people will pay premiums for bonds these days. So that's a kind of roundabout answer, but I'll be glad to answer any questions if there's any further on that. And I agree that, hey, like a lot more people in Crowley, that's good for the bond market too.
I just want to comment that at the time we were developing the business plan and we were looking at 30 or 40 tournaments and 35 or 40 teams, the existing parking lot was probably adequate, with the idea that we were going to be able to enlarge Hinskins by moving that fence in. We were going to increase that's an existing parking space from 300 to something. Then as the project began to unfold and the problem is a good problem, we realized if we're going to size that many, then we need to have more parking. And the reason it's a good problem is we haven't even talked about the additional revenue we're going to see in concessions and sales tax in the city that will help us reimburse these accounts that we're going to be using to build the parking lot, build them out in large like we do. So, what I'm asking you to do tonight and send it to full council next week is to authorize the preparation of the plans for the parking lot citywide, take it out of the street project, so that when we do the street project, the parking lots won't be in it. We can construct those expansions now and be ready for tournament activity in the February, March timeframe. I think, Peter, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the first tournament he thinks we're going to have is going to be near the end of February.
That's right now towards the end of February for tournament. That's the earliest. I'm not comfortable before that because of Mr. Dawson's construction timeframe, but certainly, you know, what he's projecting, we can backfill from February to January.
Page 5 is, again, asking you to authorize us to prepare plans and specifications for city parking lot improvements.
I'll let you go ahead. I'll second. Any further discussion?
That's the only question I have is the funds that are dedicated for streets and drainage. I guess it's more of a legal question for Jay. Those funds can be utilized for the parking lot?
Yes, sir. Parking with respect to streets is an essential element of streets itself. If you can't provide parking, you know, the streets really are superfluous. So you can do that, yes.
And Tom had already approved it, and that's why it was in the original contract A and contract B for the street project. But if you're not changing any of that, that was already in the project.
Yeah, and it was already $660,000. This is just an additional $660,000 added to what we had already discussed. So it's not the whole $1.7 million being thrown at us all at once. Any more discussion? Okay. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
On that same page, just for your information, if you look at where I have contracts for fiscal year 2020, 2021 material purchases, and contract for fiscal year 2021 labor and equipment, general construction work, I just want to point out that those contracts are in place as of September 1st. If you go to page 10, city bridges is the topic, item 6 on page 10. You authorize the repair of pilings on several bridges. That work has been completed. Of note is Jacobs Avenue Bridge, which had to be closed because of that piling situation. We'll need to load rate Jacobs again and have some bridge administrator with police jury. And so we expect it to be reopened for traffic at the posted load, which is 5 tons by the end of the month. That's just for your information, no action. And that's all I have this evening for public works.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Is there any other legal action or items that need to come before the Public Works Committee? And the committee recess.
Thank you, Mr. Crater. Utility Committee next. Mr. Reggie, that'll fall to you.
Thank you. We'll start with reports first with Mr. Tim Crater, please.
Good afternoon. Let everyone know we had 109 Louisiana 1 locate requests during the month.
We had only 18 work orders filed, sewer stop ups, missing caps, run over caps with lawnmowers, things of that sort. We treated roughly 52 million gallons of wastewater that came through the plant. You know, whatever the hurricane that we recently had, prior to the storm, we obtained a generator that we thought would eliminate a lot of work. Out of New Iberia, we connected a plug where all our lift stations have an outlet where we can run up, plug the generator up and operate the pump system when we lost power. Unfortunately, that did not happen. We run into some error problems. The first station, we thought it might have been the station itself, so we moved to another one. We ended up burning. After speaking with the electrician, it was recommended we just park it because we would continue burning boards at each station. So we parked it. Prior to that, we had already made contact with some vacuum trucks to get the system up and running, per se. We started once the power was lost, 2 or 3 o'clock Thursday morning, Magnolia Pump Station in South Crowley, the 8th Street Pump Station on the west side of town, the main pump station, which is operated by a portable generator that's 30 plus years old, and the 16th Street Pump Station has generators. They automatically kicked on and pumped. In the meantime, the other ones, we brought back in trucks too, and started 7 o'clock, roughly Thursday morning, pump till 9, 10 o'clock. It was all full after that. Same thing Friday until 11 o'clock, Friday night. Friday night was rather eventful. The main station had power. We cut the generator off. It ran fine during the first segment. When we lost power again, we cranked it. It ran a period of time, not long, maybe an hour and a half, something like that. It lost a board and a motor control board. The 3 boards are rather expensive when you total them up, 3 or 4 grand. The generator at the main station will be disconnected. We're sending it to a shop to have it repaired. The portable generator there, I don't think it's probably the last leg. It might, the person that's going to look at it might just say, hey, use it as a boat anchor. You know, that was told to us right away. And after that, you know, that night we had the electrician out there. We got a new board installed, motor control board installed. We got things cranked up, and we were back at normal at that station when the power was restored. Total, the power started coming on Thursday afternoon at certain stations. Then Friday, we started getting a couple more. By Saturday, all of the stations and the wastewater treatment plant were up and running capacity. That was the only major problems we had. No wind damage, no fences down, nothing like that. But I feel that the generator at the main pump station will be an item that we really need to look at, not just for storm season, but for any power outage, because the majority of the plants, other than 8th Street and 16th, all of the stations in the city pump to that main station right there. From there, it comes to the wastewater plant. I wanted to thank the guys that came out. We were out on the streets 6:30, 7 o'clock Thursday morning. They ran on fumes after that. You know, everybody was placed on call. They knew if we had that call, you know, a lot of them left their families, left their homes. Some of them had damage to their homes, and they gave their time to the city at the time of need. I mean, I greatly appreciate that because a lot of people won't do that, you know, to keep things running for the city. But other than that, you know, we ran about, I would think, 225 man hours from third with that. But
Do you have an estimate on the pump, the main pump to replace? Or general?
It would be a guess, probably 70, 80,000.
Is that the generator or the engine?
Generator.
The generator itself?
Stationary generator, I had 70, 80,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. Now, that's just the generator, that's probably not the installation and the base of everything, you know. That's a ballpark figure, don't quote me on that, but that's a ballpark figure, I think, 60, 80,000. But the one that we would need at the main treatment plant is, the estimate we got, that's labor top. That's 100 kW. So I would think around that.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
I will have a report from Mr. Tim Maker.
If I can, I apologize, I wanted to give out before and after parking lot sketches so you can see. First exhibit is going to show you what parking is there now. The second exhibit shows you where we're enlarging. Basically, Peter already alluded to moving the fence on that ball field next to Hinston's, moving it in, shortening the distance from home plate. That allowed us to actually use space and gain quite a bit of parking space there. In the area around the old swimming pool, the parking lot that was next to the old swimming pool, the swimming pool area itself, and the limestone area just on the east side of Pony, we'll make that one vast parking area. Where we'll actually get more parking there than we're going to get at Hinston's when we build Hinston's out. So I'm going to pass these out. Again, it's 2 pages. I apologize. I meant to give it to you when I was making the presentation. I got ahead of myself. So I'm going to do this. Just give it a second. That's about. We break down the number of parking spaces in each location. Yeah. I think that was taken already. Back to utility committee, I have one action item, and that would be explained on pages 18 and 19 in my report. Item 12, the sewer service user fee rate adjustment ordinance. Again, you'll be able to absorb it a little bit better maybe when you read it after the meeting. But on page 19, I'm kind of giving you a summary of what was done in compliance with ordinance number 1505, which was adopted by council in March when the new base rate was established at $13.20, and a new rate per thousand after 2,000 gallons was established at $3.42. And also we did out-of-town customers at a higher rate, $22.50 above 3,000 and $8.25 per thousand respectively. So that, what I just said is the formula that's in place today. That ordinance 1505 and previous ordinances called for an annual review of the expenses and revenues of your utility department. A process was put in place where we had run up out of 2 meetings. The first meeting was in July, the second meeting was in August. All that was delayed because we couldn't easily meet and get together. There was not the kind of meeting with disseminating information in a Zoom conference, so we waited until we were able to actually get together. The meetings took place at the Rice Festival Annex on Avenue Ave. What this boils down to, and I believe you have a copy, you should have a copy of a resolution that Tom prepared to introduce an ordinance that would establish new rates in accordance with the certification that was issued to you by city clerk, city engineer, and city auditor. That would be Aaron Crater, Tim Mayer, and Rob Carter. I think Rob is here. Yeah, Rob is here tonight, and Aaron is as well. if you have any questions about how the process was conducted, if you do recall, the ordinance required that there was a makeup of the committee that included chairman of your finance committee, chairman of your utility committee, a citizen who is here, Tracy Young, and of course Aaron, Rob, and myself. The meeting wasn't 100% attended. In each meeting, we had maybe a few people less than the full 100% attendance. By the time we finished the second meeting, it was a consensus and a complete consensus that we didn't need to have a third meeting. The 3 meetings is what we asked to get the job done, but it's not something that was. The resolution that you have in front of you should also include the certification by the 3 of us. It should include a letter from the city attorney that would state that the process was conducted in accordance with city ordinance. We offer that introductory resolution tonight for your consideration. And of course, I want to answer any questions you have about the process.
Mr. Rankin?
Thank you. Did you want to go first?
Yeah, you do it first.
Mr. Mayor, y'all had 2 meetings, you said?
Yes.
How many of those meetings was Mr. Abshire available for?
He attended none of it. Neither one.
But I'm sure we extended invitations for him.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
So I got to be going in about 10 minutes, and sometimes this discussion runs long. So speaking as a citizen on that committee, there were 10 different plans that we come up with. We come from 0 base rate to a higher user rate to a lesser base rate and with everything in between. And after they ran the numbers, this rate here seemed to do the less, I don't want to say harm, but the less increase in a specific group. And when I say group, I mean low users, medium users, and high users. You have what I would call maybe the widowed ladies that probably use less than 3,000 gallons a month. And then you got the high-end users such as maybe the police, jury, the jail. And this rate we come up with, it didn't affect that much. It had an increase, but it didn't affect anyone too drastically. And I do want to note that on January 30th, when we had this meeting, after y'all voted not to increase,